keep, follow the rule, follow the right thing. Sometimes they just burn the plastic, whenever they want, they put it under the ground, pollute the water, they run it all the time, making noises, people cannot stand that.
Most of the people affected by recycling plants, and this is true all over the world, tend to be poor, tend to be vulnerable, people who don't have a lot of recourse to the legal system or otherwise.
We organized 3 protests, actually. Each one get bigger and bigger. The last one was about a year and a half ago, and we got together right around 700 people right in front of the factory, the plant. We protest, we have put up the sign, but at the end, it's just another activity that we did, but never get any response back.
There's a simple reason why there is such a huge demand for recycling globally, and that is that we all consume an incredible amount of plastic in particular. Plastic consumption has skyrocketed all over the world, but countries like the US, like Japan, like the UK, don't have the domestic capacity to recycle all that plastic. In fact, they have nowhere near the domestic capacity they would need. So the only way to deal with it, if you don't want to just throw it into landfill, is to send it overseas, to stuff it into shipping containers and send it to poorer countries where that infrastructure does exist. So that's what we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years in Southeast Asia, is a big increase in long-haul recycling shipments, largely from the rich world.
We detected a container full of so-called plastic scraps, but he opened it up. It's not scraps inside; it's all plastic waste. So
This was recently?
Yeah, a couple of months ago. So,
Oh, really? Okay.
So we kindly throw it back to the U.S. I've asked our pollution control department to coordinate very closely with all the other agencies concerned and put our fist down on it. Of course, we cannot just say we're going to stop from 100 to 0 overnight. It has to be a gradual change. And, there's differences between plastic scraps and plastic waste. And unfortunately, the plastic waste are being disguised as plastic scraps on paper. And in the past, I think some people have used that as a loophole to bring those waste into Thailand.
The Thai government has, for a few years now, been moving toward a ban on foreign plastic waste import. But as I learned from the Environment Minister and from others I've spoken to, that's much easier said than done. Recycling is a big industry. There are, in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, large and profitable companies that depend on, among other things, plastic waste imports from overseas. And so they've been a source of opposition to these measures. Do you think the government will really ban plastic imports effectively?
Government can change from time to time. I don't believe in anything. I believe in when it happens or pronounced as a law. When something hurt the economy, something hurt the people, workers, or whatever, that plan will be delayed. We need a law first. The plastic, single-use plastic and recycled plastic law.
Over the last several years, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, those countries have cracked down to varying extents on waste imports. And what's going to happen next, I think it's very fair to say, is these flows of waste will find their ways to other countries and perhaps to countries that are much poorer. Myanmar is one that gets talked about a lot. There are countries in Africa that are being talked about a lot as potential destinations. And these are places even less able to cope with these inflows than Thailand or Indonesia is.
don't blame me. Whether it's risking a national default or driving banks to failure, it's got to be someone else's fault. This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I'm David West. This week, economist Glenn Hubbard on the damage being done by the fight over the federal deficit. Deborah Lair of Edelman Global Advisory on what China stands to gain from U.S. turmoil.
How do they build relations either with the United States to keep those markets open, or can they find new markets?
And Catherine Judge of Columbia on whether we need all of those regional banks after all.
We're seeing very real questions about the regional bank business model.
This week, Global Wall Street was looking for someone to step up and take some responsibility, like for the failure of 3 major regional banks. And the former head of Silicon Valley Bank was there to help, as he found a host of culprits other than himself, like the Fed and social media.
I believe that SVB's failure was brought about by a series of unprecedented events.
But the chair of the Senate Banking Committee had a decidedly different view.
We know your banks were fatally mismanaged. The next obvious question is why? With a simple answer, the same answer we find to most questions about big bank failures, because the executives were getting rich.
And when it comes to the debt ceiling, Republicans and Democrats picked up the theme of pointing fingers at everyone but themselves for the risk of the United States flirting with reneging on its debt for the first time in 234 years. As President Biden has put the onus on Republicans, and Speaker McCarthy continues to point his finger at President Biden.
Do we have obstacles? Yes, we have a big obstacle in the White House.
But even as the two sides blamed one another, they did find some room for optimism.
Confident that we'll get the agreement on the budget that America